being brought into the courtroom now.
Attorney Bucci, are you ready? We are. Attorney Stan?
Yes, thank you.
Attorney Murphy? Yes, thank you. Officer?
We are.
You're gonna get the judge now. The courtroom is silent. We're waiting for the judge to appear.
Court, all rise. The Franklin County Superior Court is now in session with the Honorable Judge Agostini presiding. For the record, today is Thursday, 10 May 2018. Please be seated, remain quiet, turn off all electronics. Court is now in session.
I ask the parties to remember this session is being digitally recorded. Please state your name and identify the party to which you represent. Call it Criminal Indictment 2016-068, Criminal Indictment 2017-020, Commonwealth versus Joshua Hart, Criminal Indictment 2016-069, Criminal Indictment 2017-021, Commonwealth versus Brittany Smith. Both matters on for sentencing. Your Honor.
Okay, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Are the parties ready to go forward?
We are.
Okay, Commonwealth, I'll hear you.
Commonwealth moves for sentencing. Your Honor,
You may sit down. Thank you.
with respect to the family, I'd ask that they be called jointly, as both defendants are present in the courtroom. And I understand that the first person that the family would like the court to hear from is Lucinda Costa.
Yes.
So we're going to hear some witness statements now.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Ma'am, good afternoon. First of all, thank you for coming in here. I know it's very difficult, but we certainly do appreciate it. What can you say that could be helpful?
My name is Lucinda Costa, and I'm Joanna Fisher's youngest child. It's difficult to explain how this horrific event and the year and a half since has impacted me. It consumes my mind every day. Every day, I think about my elderly, paralyzed mother on the floor, bleeding while fighting for her life and begging not to be killed. I try to imagine the sheer terror she must have been feeling while watching her beloved husband get stabbed and smothered until he stopped moving. When I saw her in the ER that day, she told me, "I thought he must be dead." I think about her in the hospital and how sad she was to have lost the love of her life, her best friend and partner for the past 35 plus years. She was heartbroken, yet she was still focused on trying to get better so she could go home to that house, the home she specifically designed to meet her needs. Our mother instilled a passion for hard work in all of us. My siblings and I have attended court for all of the pretrial happenings and have been here for every day of 2 trials. Because of all this, I have missed many important events at work, including my mentee being honored for her academic accomplishments, the inauguration of our new college president and my boss, a leadership conference that I attend every year, and much more. As a matter of fact, I can imagine my mom saying, "Shouldn't you be at work?" To miss important events and this much work is extremely difficult for me. It is as though these defendants are stealing from me and my family over and over again. Since and due to these despicable happenings, we have missed our mother at weddings, hiker reunions, holidays, birthdays, family celebrations, and so much more. We have a new generation of the family starting, and if it weren't for the pitiless acts of the defendants, our mother would be there, able to play with and read to her great-grandchildren. At this time of year, we would find her outside on a nice day in her electric jazzy chair, working in her garden or just enjoying the sunshine. At holiday time, we would make jam together as gifts for helpers and friends. She held bridge club at her home, sometimes twice a week, right up until this dreadful day. Just think about how many people have been affected by the loss of our mother. Everywhere I go, people have a story to tell me about my mom and Tom. With all of this having been said, I want to add that we all expect to lose our parents in our lifetime. That's just the natural process. But no one should have to endure the loss of his or her mother in such a brutal and callous way. I believe that life in prison without parole is warranted, and honestly not harsh enough. I would suggest the death penalty, but that doesn't exist in this state, and honestly, our mother was firmly against that, even after this unbelievably heartless crime. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Your Honor, the next person to speak will be Janice Lanu.
Ma'am, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Again, thank you for coming down here. Again, I know how difficult
Okay,
this
this witness has asked
but
that
I'd
we
like to
don't
hear
show her
whatever you think might be helpful.
during her statements.
Well, thank you for the chance to speak today. When I think back on my father before October 5th, 2016, I remember how much he was loved and admired by me and so many others. I remember his love of life, family, friends, and hiking, especially in the White Mountains, on the Appalachian Trail, and down into the Grand Canyon. I remember his longtime desire to live in good health to at least 100, and his absolutely serious goal to reach 106. He was on track 3 weeks from his 96th birthday and 1 week from his next trip to his beloved Grand Canyon. I remember his continual efforts to keep himself fit, to be able to truly live and enjoy every moment of such a long, satisfying life. I remember all the times my sister and I would spend with him, sharing family stories, discussing local and national politics, going out to lunch, planning the next hiking trip, and ultimately taking many trips with him. When I think of Joanna, my thoughts center on her Energizer Bunny approach to life. If she wasn't working, she was filling her spare time with volunteer work at her church and for her town, hiking, gardening, cooking, and hosting family gatherings, large and small. I think of her determination to overcome the setbacks she had been dealt in her life. I think of how fierce she was in her love for children and in standing up for young mothers. That was the basis for her success in creating Valuing Our Children, a program so effective in helping families learn good parenting skills. When I think back on the days since October 5th, 2016, I'm furious for all that was taken from my father and that he was taken from our family because the defendants refused to assume any responsibilities for their actions, and they continued to make poor decisions and bad choices, which resulted in the deaths of 2 innocent people. That was such a senseless and horrific act. I'm angry that the defendants robbed him of so much more than his car and credit cards. They robbed him of the years he still had ahead of him and the dignified and peaceful death he ultimately deserved. Why should the defendants on that night of October 5th, 2016, be in Tom and Joanna's living room, where my father and stepmother should have been safe? That these 2 people who treated others with such respect, generosity, and kindness should be subjected to such unprovoked violence and pain is incomprehensible to me. I intensely miss my father's calm and positive presence in my daily life, at family gatherings, and at hiker reunions and dinners that we all have for hikers who over the years went down to the Phantom Ranch with him in the canyon. I'm exhausted and fearful as I've lost untold hours of sleep, while the events of October 5th go through my mind on a continuous loop for hours each night. I notice unusual and frightening sounds in the night that now trigger fear, that someone is trying to or has broken into our house. I'm profoundly sad that the defendant's actions have had such an effect on the towns of Orange and Athol, where people have, up until now, felt safe and secure in their homes. It's obvious to me from talking to so many people that this is no longer the case. The ripple effect of fear and anger has been huge, not just for our family, but for our friends, neighbors, and residents of our community. I'm infuriated that in all the time I've spent in this courtroom, I've seen no sign that the defendants might be sorry for what they did. I've seen only indifference and perhaps apprehension as to their own fate. I don't want them to be free to walk the streets of Orange or anywhere else, free to steal another car or a credit card, or in a sudden burst of unprovoked cruelty, another life. Before this, I've never believed in capital punishment or an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and I still don't. I'm not looking for revenge, but I do demand justice. I want no less than life in prison for the defendants with no chance of parole, ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Your Honor, the next person to speak would be Karen Herc.
Ma'am, good afternoon. What can you tell me?
Well, Thomas Harty was my grandfather and Joanna Fisher my step-grandmother, two of the kindest, most thoughtful, and compassionate people I will ever know. Their families have lost, their friends have lost, their community has lost, and I will forever be lost without them. It was very difficult for me to write this statement, as you can imagine. There are so many things I want to say and convey about my grandfather, who I loved and missed so dearly. The words may be jumbled, but the emotion is raw and so very real. I write this statement about my grandfather as his death has left a hole in my heart where he used to be. For as long as I can remember, my grandfather's goal was to live to the ripe age of 106. I fully believed that this would happen. Why? Because his mind was as sharp as a tack. He was on top of current events and had strong opinions on national and local politics. His body was in excellent physical shape. He was strong. That was Thomas Harty. Yes, he was 95 years old, but he had so much more life to live. He had everything going for him. He had his health, he had goals, he had plans. These plans included his 45th trip to hike at his beloved Grand Canyon at the end of October 2016. At almost 96 years old, when his life was brutally taken, he was a business owner, still working a full-time job selling and delivering tools. I was even lucky enough to help him out at his store during summers and other times when he needed me. He took great pride in his work, and retiring fully was never an option for him. My grandpa's a constant present in my life from very early on. We had the best relationship, and he was always there for me when I needed him. We bonded on trips to New York City, Niagara Falls, and Florida. One of my favorite trips was just the two of us driving cross-country to California and then back to Massachusetts. Eventually, just a few years ago, he talked me into a hiking trip to Zion and the Grand Canyon with him, one of his favorite places on earth. And I am so grateful that I took that trip and finally understood why he loved it so much. I didn't realize at the time that it would be the last trip I would ever take with him, because he was supposed to live to 106. I will never forget the countless hours he spent teaching me how to drive a stick shift on the dead end and dirt roads of Bartlett, New Hampshire, where we spent many weeks of the summers and winters in the vacation home that he built for his family to enjoy. Grandpa was always available if I needed to talk. He was a great listener and gave sound advice, oftentimes talking me off the ledge with a soft-spoken, calm demeanor. He taught me not to sweat the small stuff, and that is how he lived his life. Nothing got him worked up, as it was all just small stuff. He had such a steady, calm presence that I always left feeling better after discussing things that were going on in my life. I miss these conversations terribly and wish if only we could talk one more time. Family traditions were very important to him. He attended all of the major events and milestones. Unfortunately, because of this cruel and senseless act, not only have I been cheated, but so have my kids. Their great-grandfather can no longer share his wisdom and knowledge or significant life events. The backbone of our family is gone. Deep conversations and precious moments have been taken away from us because two selfish people maliciously murdered him. It needs to be known that my grandfather gave everyone the benefit of the doubt. He was kind to every person he met. If the defendants came into the house that night and demanded money, he would have given it to them. If they didn't demand the money, he most likely would have still given it to them. That was who he was, kind, compassionate, and empathetic. However, he was never given that chance. He was immediately attacked. He fought back. He fought with every ounce of his being. It wasn't enough for the defendants to just frighten or intimidate my so-called elderly grandfather, but he was so brutally attacked. The day after this tragic event, I went to my grandpa's house to retrieve personal belongings, and I will never be able to unsee the events that unfolded that day. My grandfather had so much life left to live. There were more events to attend, more hikes to take, new people to meet, more heart-to-hearts, and more memories to be made. I've seen many news reports of people in similar situations as my own, telling the defendants that they forgive them because it will help with closure. I'm here today to say that I will never, ever forgive this ruthless act, and my closure will be a guaranteed life sentence in jail for the defendants with absolutely no chance of parole. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Your Honor, the next person to speak will be Jack Harty.
All right,
Sir, good afternoon.
good afternoon.
What can you tell me?
Well, Tom's mother, which I consider my mother, brought me up since I was 6 months old on the farm where he grew up. And he was my godfather. And there's nothing, I could stay here for a week and you couldn't make up the things that he would do. You know, he would give everybody, if he had $10 and you needed 5, he would give you the 10. And he was with me that whole day because he was forcing me to go to the Grand Canyon. I've never taken a vacation in my life, and he insisted that I go, so he got me a plane ticket and everything, and he came to my shop, and we were getting everything packed up and getting ready to go, and he left my shop at like 6 that night because he had to go home and get Joanna ready and because of the wheelchair and all that stuff, and he just was the best guy in the world. And his mother, which I consider my mother, would always tell the story that everybody in the family lived to over 100 unless a horse killed them, because her father got killed by a horse and her brother got killed by a horse. Well, now the story is unless a moron killed them. And maybe I shouldn't say that, but you know, I thought of everything I'm going to say, and then when you get up here, you can't think of it because you're so upset. When I heard that it happened, I bit my teeth and I broke 2 of my teeth. I was so upset. And I couldn't believe it. Just the nicest guy in the world. Like my grandkids, I have a shop, and when he would come to visit me, which he did all the time, and he would always say that I was his favorite nephew and stuff, my grandkids would run like it was a circus was in town. Uncle Tom's here, Uncle Tom's here. Just, you know, everybody loved him. You had to meet him. If you met him, you loved him. It's like the Grand Canyon tour. He told me he was going to go to the Grand Canyon, and this was 20-something years ago, and one of my friends was there. I said, take him with him. And he took him, and he's gone with him twice a year for the last 20 years. And, you know, everybody loved him. Just the greatest guy in the world. It's just such a shame. But in better shape than I am now, you know, he wasn't an old man. He was a real person. He could do anything that anybody here could do, even at 95. And he would have made the 106 or whatever he wanted to, because he was telling me that day, he says he's going to go in, walk in himself at 100, and he says even if he has to go down on a mule after that, he would. And he said at 106, they can carry me in and throw me around his ashes, and it just didn't happen. I can't say enough about him. There's so many things I'd like to say, but I can't. So, thank you.
Well, we certainly appreciate you coming down here and telling us. Thank you.
I appreciate being able to talk. Thank you.
Your Honor, the next person to speak will be Don Harty.
Okay, sir, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What can you tell me?
Tom Harty was my father, and he's still my hero. And I apologize in advance that I'm not going to be as brief as my family members. I just want to start out, Charles Dickens' classic novel, The Tale of Two Cities, started out with the line, "It's the best of times, it was the worst of times." And for the statement today, I'd like to change that and say they were the best of people, they're the worst of people. Joanna Fisher and Tom Harty, as the folks that preceded me have said, were the finest people in the world. The most caring, the most generous, the kindest, give you the shirt off their back. They would do anything for you. You know, my father, all through my life growing up, he was always a source of strength for me. When things weren't going good, I knew I could always go to my father and he would always have the answer. He was a perennial optimist. He always saw the light at the end of the tunnel. 106, I think, is an understatement. I think he would have gone to 120. He's just that tough a guy. They were always helping the less fortunate than them. And neither one of them were wealthy. Neither one of them had a lot of savings. But as Jack said, if they had $10, they'd give you the $10. They were just most generous. They never refused to call for help, anytime, any hour. I remember one time my wife and I broke down on the New York Thruway and got a wrecker, spent the night, and got towed home. And I think he was probably 85 at the time. And he was very upset with me that I didn't call him, and he would come out and towed my car back. He was always willing to do anything. And he was a great man all through his life. When he met Joanna, he became a better man. I asked him once, you know, how they initially get together, and I guess it was on a hiking trip that my sister arranged. And in the language of his generation, he said, I decided to chase her. And he said, to my surprise, a month later, she let me catch her. And they were just a great couple. You know, they fed off of each other. Their interests coincided, but they were separate as well. And they were just the best people. On the other hand, the second part of the statement, they were the worst people. And I really have trouble putting to words how much this has affected me, how it's affected the family. In speaking of the female convict, I've had restrictions placed on me for today. And it's not been by Jeremy or by the court officers or by yourself, obviously. The restrictions have been placed on me by my wife, who after 32 years of marriage has tolerated the occasional outburst of profanity from me. But there's always been one word that she has barred me from ever saying. And I will honor that today, and I will not use that word for the female convict. But all of us that have had a year and a half to lay awake at night and just fathom what has happened, what evil has happened to our family, what's happened to all their friends, all the people they knew. And it's devastating. These two people only cared about themselves. They had no concept of good and bad. They had no concept of value of life. All they wanted was what was best for them, and damn anything that gets in their way. I just can't put to words the anger, the hate I have for those two people sitting in this room. Through the course of this event, our families had to rely on a lot of people to help out, starting with law enforcement. And knowing that there were two killers on the loose and knowing not where they are, we put our faith in the various police departments, the Orange and Athol police departments, state police, all the way down to Virginia. And you're always reading in the news or hearing on TV how an investigation was screwed up or something was done wrong so that people didn't go to jail. All the police in this particular affair did everything perfectly. We can't be more thankful to how they handled themselves, how they handled this case, and how they came to bat for our family. We owe everything to them. We next had to rely upon the district attorney's office, Jeremy, and all the people that supported him. And the first time I met Jeremy, I asked him, why should I trust in you to prosecute such a tough case? You look young. I don't know if, I've got the faith in you to do this. And he said, trust me, I will give this everything I've got. And he did, and then some. You can't ask for a more thorough, better prosecutor than Jeremy. He just did an awesome job, and our family love him for it. We're thankful to you being a fair judge in this trial. Impartial. I was a little disappointed to read that at age 70 you have to have mandatory retirement due to state rules, and I took a little solace in the fact that U.S. Supreme Court justices have no retirement age, so if you ever need recommendations, we've got a room full of them here. And finally, we had to rely on a jury of their peers, which to me is hard to fathom because there are no peers for these two people. But you were able to pull 24 people, common citizens, that were blessed, as you said, with their God-given common sense and their life experiences, to hear all the evidence that was given in this case, to not hear the evidence that was not given that should have been given. And they really studied on this. I'm sure it was very, very difficult. Many of us in the family thought they would come out with a verdict 10, 15, 20 minutes later. It took them 8, 9 hours because they took this the way they should have. They were very professional about it, and they wanted to make sure what they did was right. So we're very thankful for them. And now going forward, our family is going to rely on another group of people, which will be the jail committee, the prison community, the people that work there, the people that live there, the community. It's extremely important to me that as they leave the halls of justice here, they don't go and have a country club atmosphere, that they're not heroes, that they're not role models in a prison. It's my hope that anybody surrounding them going forward will continuously let them know that they are evil, they killed two of the most beautiful people in the world, and never let them forget that act. Impact statement. I've been impacted just like the rest of my family. It's been horrendous. I have never had trouble sleeping at night. I have trouble now. Like my niece said, you hear noises in the night, you don't know if you're safe. I've always had at my bedside table a book, a pair of reading glasses. Now I have a book, reading glasses, and a handgun. Because I don't want to happen to me and my wife what happened to my father and Joanna. And it's unfortunate that I have to do that. Another impact on this for myself and the family is never being able to see Joanna walk again. She was trying so hard, she was making progress, she was vibrant, and she was gonna lick it. She was gonna get so she could walk again. And these two, I can't call them people, these two individuals have deprived all of us of that. They've deprived us of being at their sides. Somebody was saying that Lucinda was saying, when they get to that age, you expect the call is going to come in at some point in time. You prepare yourself for it, but you can never prepare yourself for a call that your father's been brutally murdered. And for the next 8 to 10 hours, he is laying in a chair as people take pictures and do forensic work. It eats at the heart. He deprived us of the right to be by his side and hold his hand and talk to him and hear his love for us and share our love for him. We will never have that. We will never be able to hear his last words to us. And it's, to me, horrifying to know that his last words were in the company of these two worthless individuals. And his last words were, "You fucking bastard." It shouldn't be that way. At one point during the second trial, Counselor Stam used the words "unfortunate," and I forget what it was in relationship to. I thought they were a very underrated term that should have been a lot stronger. But I've thought about it. I think there's a lot of things that are unfortunate here. First of all, it's unfortunate that their parents didn't practice birth control. Because if anybody should have never come into this world, it's those two. They have done no good throughout their life. They've left a trail of disaster behind them. The world would have been a lot better place without them. It's unfortunate that the male convict, at a young age, with all the women out there, the young women, had to make a choice of the woman that he chose, a twisted, backstabbing, a evil person that just used him for a tool to get what she wanted. As much as I hate him, he deserved better. It's unfortunate that the Commonwealth does not have the death penalty. And I know it doesn't. And I know people before me have said that my father and Joanna, neither one supported the death penalty. And I know it's never going to happen, but it's a shame to think of these two people drawing breath, eating food, firmly attached to the public tit going forward. It's just unfortunate. It's also unfortunate that the female convict brought forth into the world 2 children, 2 more innocent victims that will have to go through life with the scar of a horrific, uncaring, unthoughtful mother. I don't know who will get custody of them, whether it be the grandparents or a foster home or where it will be. But I hope that the first time when one of those kids comes home from the playground, as they will, and in tears saying that the kids on the playground said my mother is a no-good murdering whore, I hope their caretaker or grandmother will use that as a learning experience and say, the kids on the playground were right, but that doesn't reflect on you. You have a clean slate to go forward and do good in the world. Where she was evil, you need to be kind. Where she was selfish, you need to be caring for people and help people out. And on and on. I think it's ironic that if they end up living in the Athol Orange area, they will be eligible for a fund that my father set up, the Let 'Em Shine Fund at the Athol YMCA that he set up 35 years ago. And even with his very meager income, put seed money in and kept supporting it to the tune of around $40,000 to give free memberships to children of single parents or kids with no parents. And several hundred kids have gone through that program over the years. And it's ironic that her 2 kids will probably be eligible for that. And I know my father would be happy with that. That 2 obviously very disadvantaged kids might be helped out by this program that he set up. I thought it was unfortunate that the defense counsel in the second trial didn't want anything up on the pictures sympathetic to make the jury feel sympathy. None of our family wanted sympathy in this. All we wanted to have is for the jury to see Tom and Joanna as good, loving people and not just a couple of obstacles that got in the way of this shopping trip. And I hope going forward people will see that. Forgiveness has been mentioned, and that's a no-brainer for me. I will never forgive these people. My father was very forgiving. He would forgive anybody. We often ask him, how could you forgive that person after what he did to you? And he would say, every person has some good in them. And he would hone out and find that 1%, 5% of good and focus on that. My father, I believe, could forgive these 2 for what they did to him. He would never forgive them for what they did to Joanna. Another term, closure, that has been mentioned. You know, our friends, anybody we talk with, are put into an uncomfortable position of trying to say the right thing, which we all know is very difficult. And one term that's been used many times is closure. You heard it first when they were dragged back from Virginia. Hopefully that brings closure. It didn't. Now with the trials having taken place and you handing down a sentence today, people are saying, now this must really bring closure. And it doesn't. It brings satisfaction. It brings a sense of feeling that the right thing has been done by them, but it doesn't bring closure. For me, closure will only come when I get the news that they are dead and not before. Because just the mere thought of them on this earth after what they did to these 2 beautiful people, I can't have closure until then. And finally, Your Honor, you know, the crimes that you're going to be sentencing these people for today took away these 2 people from us physically. We will never be able to hold them again and hug them. We'll never be able to hear their stories. I'll never be able to hear my father tell the same story 6 times and have it just as interesting the 6th time around. But I want to assure you that they are still with us. In the values they've passed down to their family members, to their friends, to anybody they touched, they're still with us. There are hundreds and hundreds of people that are going forth with their values that they've learned from them. And I know that the next time I'm on Mount Monadnock and I hear the wind whistling, it'll be my father talking to me, telling me, don't feel bad, go on with life, I'm in a good place. And I know the next time I'm at the Grand Canyon and I see 2 ravens soaring majestically, I know that's my father and Joanna overseeing their flock of people going down and happy that everything they've done continues to go on. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Got one of my jobs. Coming up next is a short video of my father that was prepared by Kimmy Morris that she did right after my father and Joanna's death, and it brought a lot of comfort to us, and we wanted to share that with you.
Okay, thank you.
next person to speak will be Kathleen Coons.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
What can you tell me?
First of all, I can tell you what wonderful people our parents were. And I would just like to ask, if you've been to the Grand Canyon, would you raise your hand? All of these people were part of our family, are part of our family, and are part of my mother, Joanna's, and Tom's family. I have a book called The Harty Party that I would like to share with you, if I may.
Thank you.
This is a book that was put together to honor Tom and my mother, Joanna. The trips that they took together and the literally hundreds of people who went along with them on it. For some people, the adventure of their life. And for many of those people still are taking those trips because of Tom and my mother. The video that was played was made for Tom after he passed, and it's beautiful. Every year we have what we call a hiker reunion dinner for anybody who has been to the Grand Canyon, anybody who would like to go to the Grand Canyon. And if you think you're immune from being asked, except for a few of you, then you may find yourself at the bottom of the Grand Canyon sometime, because anyone is welcome. A video was made for one of the hiker dinners after my mom got sick and could not go on the trip anymore, but still supported Tom. And anytime he wanted to go, she never held him back. And so I'd like you to see that video also. Thank you.
Thank you.
No one knows the origin of the saying, behind every great man is a great woman, but this certainly applies to Tom and his wife, Joanna. Joanna, my mother, hasn't had the easiest of lives, but her optimism, kindness, and her positive outlook on life have served her well. As a mother of 4 active and rambunctious children, she started us out hiking early, probably so she could get some peace and quiet. She was laying the framework for us to love being in nature as much as she did. When she met Tom, she started hiking in earnest.
The first time I met Joanna was when 3 or 4 people wanted to see one of the trails in Orange, so I took them to walk the trail, and we got to a place that we either could follow the trail down or we could bushwhack. And Joanna said, "Sure, let's bushwhack." The rest of them said, "Wow." And so we bushwhacked down through and got to where we had to go. And so I made up my mind, I kind of think I'd like to go hiking with her, but I think I'll try to romance her and make leave on hiking. And so that worked out. And after a while, she realized I was romancing her.
Together they hiked the Metacomet-Monadnock Trail, the Mid-State Trail, the Long Trail, Mount Monadnock many, many times with scores of different friends and family members. They hiked together in New England and Old England, Ireland, Canada, numerous states, and of course into and around the Grand Canyon.
We walked about 3,000 miles together. We walked several long-distance trails. The Appalachian Trail, Joanna's done about 900 miles of it. In England, we walked on Pennine Way for about 120 miles, and that's a long-distance trail, the longest distance trail in England. It goes through the Yorkshire Dale up in Scotland. And we walked out in the Cornwall in England. Over in Ireland, we walked on the Dingle Way,
memories, either taking part in them or as the rock that he comes home to.
Joanna came with me 4 times to the canyon, and she enjoyed all those trips. And since then has been home and has encouraged me to go, and been interested in all the people that go and all the things we do.
Joanna's adventures have taken on a different shape the past 3 years, but she continues to support Tom and his adventures in her own way, and is always there for Tom, their family, and their friend.
And I just want to thank Joanna for being such a great wife and being so good to me.
Your Honor, there's hardly a more horrific set of facts imaginable. The family statements offer insights into Mr. Harty and Miss Fisher. But the facts of this case offer insights into the defendant's desires that night. They wanted to kill these people. They targeted them because they knew they could overpower them. And the evidence illustrates that because they never demanded anything. They never threatened. They simply went in and stabbed Mr. Harty to death. They brutally beat and stabbed and attempted to suffocate Mrs. Fisher. Their intent was to kill and destroy the lives of these 2 elderly people that they felt that they could overpower. And at the end of these crimes, the defendants extinguished almost 100 years of life in Mr. Harty and over 3/4 of a century in Miss Fisher for an old beat-up Toyota Matrix, about $200 in cash, and some credit cards to go shopping with. They didn't consider the lives and the families that Mr. Harty and Miss Fisher left behind. They didn't consider that Mr. Harty and Miss Fisher's children and grandchildren would miss opportunities for love and support and advice. And they did not consider that now the family is left with this horrific narrative of their own loved ones. Your Honor, today is their day of reckoning. The Commonwealth is asking that with respect to Mr. Hart on 1668, charging murder of Thomas Harty, that the court sentence Mr. Hart to life without the possibility of parole. Concurrent with that sentence, the Commonwealth is requesting that on count 5, with respect to armed robbery, the court impose a sentence of 35 to 40 years. With respect to count 7, concurrent with 5 and 1, we ask that the larceny of the motor vehicle be 3 to 5 years in state prison. And with respect to count 8, the fraudulent use of credit cards, that the defendant be sentenced to 3 to 5 years as well. With respect to count 17, 20, count 1, charging the murder of Joanna Fisher, we'd ask that Mr. Hart be sentenced to life from and after count 1 of 1668 without the possibility of parole. We'd ask also that on 1668 count 6, the armed robbery, that Mr. Hart be sentenced to 35 to 40 years to be served from and after the sentence on count 5, armed robbery, with the 35 to 40 years recommended for Mr. Harty. With respect to Brittany Smith, we're asking that on 1669, count 1, similarly, the court impose life without the possibility of parole. On count 4 and 5, charging home invasion and armed robbery with respect to Mr. Harty as the victim, we'd ask for 35 to 40 years to be served concurrent with that count 1. With respect to 7 and 8, we'd ask for the similar sentences of 3 to 5 years concurrent with count 1. And with respect to the murder of Joanna Fisher on 17/21, count 1, we'd ask that the defendant, Ms. Smith, be sentenced to a consecutive life term without the possibility of parole. We'd also ask that on 1669, counts 3 and 6, charging home invasion and armed robbery where Ms. Fisher was the victim, that the defendant be sentenced to 35 to 40 years to be served from and after 4 and 5, the home invasion and armed robbery involving Mr. Harty. Your Honor, I understand that the sentence of life without the possibility of parole is as harsh a penalty as we can hand down in Massachusetts. But the symbolism and significance of each of these human lives is worthy of an independent sentence. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Murphy, would you like to go first?
Sure, Your Honor. Recognizing that the imposition of a sentence of life without parole is statutorily prescribed, I would limit my comments, Your Honor, to simply saying that such a sentence, when imposed upon an individual who was less than 25 years old at the time that the crime was committed, is violative of both the 8th Amendment prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment and the Massachusetts State Constitution Declaration of Rights prohibition on the imposition of cruel and unusual punishment.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Stamp.
Thank you, Your Honor. On behalf of Ms. Smith, and recognizing that the sentence that you're required to impose on the 2 murder charges is life without possibility of parole, I would ask that you consider running those sentences concurrently. Really not in a position to argue for any other disposition. But in considering the sentence, I'd ask you to remember that this tragedy didn't just befall the victim's family, it befell my client's family as well. As you know, she has 2 children. She has a brother, a mother, grandmother, and a great-grandmother, as well as extended family of aunts and uncles. I ask you to consider that before this occurred, she had no record of convictions until October 3rd, hadn't had any charges. I ask you to consider the evidence you heard at the trial of the effect the drugs have had upon her life, and heroin in particular. The family who knows Brittany Smith can't imagine how she became involved in this event. Many times they have said, that's not the Brittany I know. Different people have said that many, many times. The defense, we spent about a year and a half looking for the answers, exploring the facts of the case and the information that we have, and we've come to the conclusion that it was drugs that were behind what happened. Brittany Smith simply wasn't strong enough to combat that addiction, and the result has been tragic for everybody who's involved. So I ask you not to impose a heavier penalty than is required. Ms. Smith has done all that she can. You have before you the list of medications that she takes, the efforts that she's made while she's been incarcerated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to be very brief because the sentence has been prescribed by the Commonwealth. But before I make any comments about the case, I simply want to acknowledge and thank the attorneys. I don't think people realize how much time you have to spend, whether it's through all the motions that we had, all the hearings, getting ready for trial. And I thought the attorneys acted not only appropriately, but very professionally. And at least from the court's perspective, I want to thank each and every one of you. I think you represented your profession as well as it can be represented under the most difficult of circumstances. say it, but attorneys are people as well, and it's a very difficult job, and I simply want to recognize that. Now, as far as sentencing, we often hear there are certain purposes in sentencing, and one of the purposes is to finally hear from the victims, have the victim impact statements, because during a trial, we don't hear much about the victims, and that's done intentionally. We want to find out about the events and the activities of the defendant, so we foreclose hearing a lot about the victims during the trial itself. But after the trial, this is the opportunity to hear from the victims, and that's one of the most important purposes of a sentencing. And I really do, or I have come to appreciate hearing from the victims. Because again, we hear very little during a trial, and it puts things in perspective. And I appreciated all of the individuals who came up here and provided information. I've seen you at most of the hearings that we've had. I will recognize your faces as I go forward. I mean, you were here constantly showing support. You didn't say anything or wish to be acknowledged in any way, but you were here. And this was an opportunity. And we certainly heard about both the victims during the trial. And they were unique individuals. I still haven't got an answer of why Mr. Harty wanted to live to 106 as opposed to 100, 107, but that is out there, but you get a feel for that. And again, as explained, this was a very tragic case, and to see people go through this is incomprehensible, but this was an opportunity to hear. So I wanted to, again, thank the individuals who came up here, the individuals who were here during each session. I know it was incredibly difficult. This is not a warm and welcoming facility. We do not cater to people in that way. We try to keep that level of professionalism as best as possible and continue to be a courtroom, so I know it was very difficult, but I appreciate it. And I have to say that I include within the group Miss Smith's mother. I know you were under incredibly difficult circumstances. You wanted to get your daughter back here from Virginia. You wanted her to be safe. I understand that. And I include you within that group of people who really are suffering, not because of anything you have done, but because of the events, particularly the events of the daughter. Now, I don't know about the children, but as explained here, they're under very difficult circumstances, and I can only wish the best. But the second purpose of sentencing, in this case, for me is the most difficult, because that is to offer some words of solace to the family and to put this in context, to kind of explain it, because now we've had the explanations, we've had the trial, right? Now we can understand it. And unfortunately, I have no words of solace. There is absolutely nothing I can say that will provide any measure of relief to the families of Mr. Harty or Miss Fisher. This event cannot be explained. And that was a troubling thing throughout this entire trial, that it defied any rational explanation. I mean, when we talk in the terms that were used, senseless, unnecessary, ghastly, we use these terms, but they don't explain anything, except that this was a vicious, vicious assault. That's what we are left with. I would say, from my perspective, hearing the testimony as recorded of the defendants during certain portions was gut-wrenching. To sit back and to hear what they did. They appeared to be very candid in some respects in telling us what they did, but it was incomprehensible. There is no explanation. I thought it was sadly ironic when hearing what Mr. Hart, Joshua Hart, was explaining of how he became upset with the temerity of Mr. Harty to yell at him and use profanity while he's stabbing him. I thought the irony was lost on him. And then when he describes how Joanna Fisher wasn't dying, jump on her because he felt so bad that she was in pain and she wasn't dying fast enough. As I said, this event cannot be explained. It is incomprehensible. And that's one of the things at the end where the judge comes in and says, at least we can put some perspective on it. At least we have an explanation. There is no explanation. This was a vicious event. And the thing is, there is nothing in the background, at least given to me, about the defendants that indicated that they are vicious people. And you have to understand, after 15 years, I've encountered a number of vicious people, really vicious people. There is nothing about the background in these two individuals which led me to that belief. They may not be vicious people, but they committed an incredibly vicious act in this case. And it's so very difficult in sentencing when you have no reason or explanation. I don't believe drugs did it. I don't believe bad thinking did it. Maybe it was a combination. I mean, this was evil, and it was unexplainable, and that's what makes it difficult. And that's why I can offer no words of solace. This is unexplained. And the part that I think has been reflected in the victim witness statement is that this crime strikes at the very core of all of us. We all have parents. We all see our parents age. We all see them live alone. That's part of life. I can't think of those events, and I dare anyone here from thinking about those events as we go forward, given what we witnessed here during these trials. I've never thought of my parents when they got older and they lived together, that there was any threat of any kind or nature. Well, I guess we live in a different world, and as I indicated, I have no explanation of why both Joshua Hart and Brittany Smith did what they did. All I can say that this was a ghastly, vicious offense that deserves the most serious penalty. Now, as explained, I have a very limited role. The law prescribes the penalty for first-degree murder, and that's life without parole. I am going to accept the recommendations of the Commonwealth as they've laid out, with the major point of disagreement being whether the sentences should be concurrent or consecutive. I'm going to make them consecutive to simply reflect that there were two individuals here. This was not one event. There were two separate individuals who died in very different ways under different circumstances. And they need to be a part of this. They need to be remembered. So I am accepting the Commonwealth's recommendation, and they're going to impose life without parole. And as I understand it, the only way the defendants get out is with the governor's pardon. How unlikely that may be, but that is the only way that they get out of prison. And as Attorney Bucci indicated, this is the harshest sentence that can be offered, and some people would believe it's even harsher than death because they are very young and going to be spending a very long time until they die in our penal system. Would you please waive the fees as well?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hart, on criminal indictment 2016-068, charging count 1, 5, 7, 8. And criminal indictment 2017-020, charging count 1. Excuse me, on 16-068, that includes count 6. To which you have been found guilty. Hearken to the sentence which the court has awarded against you. The court sentences you on count 1 to life to the Massachusetts Correctional Institute at Cedar Junction for life without the right to parole. On count 5, the court sentences you to 35, not less than 35, and not more than 40 years to the Massachusetts Correctional Institute at Cedar Junction to run concurrent with count 1. On count 7 and 8, the court sentences you to not less than 3, not more than 5 years to the Massachusetts Correctional Institute at Cedar Junction to run concurrent with count 1. To docket 17-020, count 1, the court sentences you 2. Life without the right to parole for the Massachusetts Correctional Institute at Cedar Junction from and after the sentence on count 1 on docket 16-068. On docket 16-068, count 6, the court sentences you to not less than 35 and not more than 40 years to the Massachusetts Correctional Institute at Cedar Junction from and after the sentence on count 5 on docket 16-068. The court has waived the $90 victim witness fee. I must tell you that you have the right to appeal the judgment of your trial within 20 days, pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 278, Section 28, and you have the right to appeal your sentence pursuant to the Superior Court Rule 64 and under the guidelines of General Law, Chapter 278, Section 28B, to the Appellate Division of the Superior Court within 10 days. You now stand committed to it. Ms. Smith, on criminal indictment 2016-069, charging counts 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And criminal indictment 2017-021, charging count 1. To which you have been found guilty, hearken to the sentence which the court has awarded against you. The court sentences you on criminal indictment 2016-068, count 1, to life without the right to parole to the Massachusetts Correctional Institute in Framingham. On count 4 and 5, the court sentences you to not less than 35 years and not more than 40 years to the Massachusetts Correctional Institute at Framingham to run concurrent with count 1. On count 7 and 8, the court sentences you to not less than 3 and not more than 5 years to the Massachusetts Correctional Institute at Framingham to run concurrent with your sentence on count 1. On criminal indictment 2017-021, the court sentences you to life without the right to parole at the Massachusetts Correctional Institute at Framingham to run from and after your sentence on criminal indictment 2016-069, count 1. The court sentences you on criminal indictment 2016-069, counts 3 and 6 to not less than 35 years and not more than 40 years to the Massachusetts Correctional Institute at Framingham from and after the sentence on counts 4 and 5 on criminal indictment 2016-069. The court has waived the $90 victim witness fee, and you have the right to appeal the judgment of your trial within 20 days pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 278, Section 28. Further, you have the right to appeal your sentence pursuant to the Superior Court Rule 64 and under the guidelines of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 278, Section 28B, to the Appellate Division of the Superior Court within 10 days. Ma'am, you now stand committed.
Your Honor, there is a request for a stay.
Do you wish to be heard at this time?
Yes, please. The
Okay.
request is that Ms. Smith be able to remain at the House of Correction for an additional 3 weeks so she can see her children.
I'm going to deny that request.
And the request for a stay has been denied. You now stand committed. Thank you.
Court all rise. Court is now in recess.
Okay, we're going to end the broadcast here. Thanks for watching MassLive. You can catch all the details of the story at masslive.com.